What's up, family, and welcome to yet another episode of the Digital Discipleship Podcast. I don't know about you, but it feels like we just keep on coming back, right? That we just keep on pumping out these episodes, and I hope it's been a blessing to you, that you're getting something from it, that you're learning something, that it's helping you in a real tangible way. Because I'm not just doing this just because I need something to do. That's a part of it. Like, I got to get this stuff out of my brain, out of my head. The stuff that the Lord has just poured into me, I just want to pour into other people. But I also hope that it's being helpful to you, right? So we've been on this journey now. We're all the way here in episode 8. And I'm telling you, man, I am having a ball. I'm having so much fun doing this, and I hope you are too, right? If you haven't been paying attention, make sure that you're looking at the show notes because we're dropping links down there. We're dropping information for you. We're dropping stuff to help you along the way to make sure that you can take some next steps. So today we're continuing. We've kind of been in almost like a podcast mini series, really, where we've really been on this mini series called I Need Some Help. Right? I wonder, let's go church for a second. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, I need some help, right? Like, I need some help. And really what this is around is that I wanted to take this whole month and just focus in on the areas that I'm hearing pastors scream, if you would, where I'm hearing pastors say, hey, here's some places where we really need some help. We really need to take some next steps. So today we're talking about I need some help. So we're talking about a team. And so I'm going to give you a future strategy, a simple strategy to build your future team, right? Because here is the reality. And I want to break this down for a second. We're talking about building the team of the future. Because here's a reality I know that many leaders are fighting through is that you have a team, but they match the past of the church, but maybe not the future of the church. And so what I want to help you do is to map through how to go ahead and get ahead of that by saying, how do we convert this team into a team that fits our future and into where we're going and so on and so on. So that's what we're going to be dealing with today, team of the future. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Henry, and I am the systems architect. I help pastors, churches, networks, and denominations build the systems they need to grow. And growth is defined spiritually, numerically, financially, amongst other things. So if you need some help growing in the area of your church, then I would love to have a conversation with you. I will warn you up front, I don't work with everybody because I love to be very hands-on with the people that I do work with. And so I'm pretty selective. So amongst other things, you have to be the kind of leader who is excited about putting in the work, putting in the effort to see things go to the next level. And then I will come along and work with you. Now, what I won't do is do it for you. I will do it with you. I will come alongside to help you and work with you. All right. So enough about that. Let's talk about what you came here for. We're talking about building out the future team. All right. But first, let's talk about why you need a team. Right. Why do you as a leader need a team? Because if we're honest, you could probably do it all yourself. Right. Like, you could get it all done. You're gifted. You're so gifted that you're the best in the room at everything you do. You're the best in worship. You're the best in children's ministry. You're the best in preaching. You're the best at outreach. You're the best at evangelism. Maybe I'm being a little bit facetious there, but right, in some cases, especially if you're leading a church under 100, it's really easy to just step up to the challenge of doing it all yourself. Let me tell you how I know, because I'm guilty. I've done it before. At least I've tried to do it before, and it didn't work out really well. So here's what I learned. Here are just 3 reasons. There are way more reasons, but here are just 3 reasons why you as a leader need a team. Number 1, you need to avoid burnout. You need to avoid burnout. I know how strong we are and how gifted we can be, but time eventually catches up with all of us. And if we're not careful, we will fall to the battle with time. And I don't want to see that happen to you, and it happens in the area of burnout. Let me tell you a very real story from my life. This is around 2014. About 2014, our church has grown. We planted our church in 2010. 99 people showed up to the first service. We grow it down to about 35. And then from 35, we actually start to grow. So in about 6 months, we're about 75. In about a year's time, we're at 125. We sit at 125 for another 6 months. And then we kind of break through that 175, 200 barrier. By year 3, we're around 250. By the time we get to this point that I'm about to tell you about in 2014, we're about 350 people, right? We've got a small facility where we can get about 100 and 125 people in there. So we're doing 3 services on the weekend, on Sunday, and but we're discipling people. We've got small groups going. We've got ministries going. A lot of great stuff is happening, right? Well, here's what happened. One day I wake up and I'm getting ready to go to church. At this point, we live right around the corner from the church. So, I mean, it's literally a 15-second drive from our house to the church, right? And I'm waking up to go to church. And I wake up that Sunday morning and I'm trembling. My hands are literally trembling. I am crying uncontrollably. My body is hurting and locked up. And my wife is trying to get me to lay down. And all I keep saying is, I gotta go preach. I gotta go do it. This is what I'm called to do. This is what the Lord called me to do. It's my responsibility. It's my duty. This is what I gotta do. And I'm telling her, I gotta go do it. The people are waiting. I gotta go do this. Is what the Lord called me to do. And my wife is so concerned, and she picks up the phone and she calls our sister-in-law, who happens to be a pharmacist, and she tells her, she says, listen, get him some Tylenol PM, make him take 2 of them and lay down. Do not let him leave that house and try to go to church today. And so my wife calls our assistant pastor at the time, tells him, hey, look, we're not going to make it. You got to preach today. He needs to lay down. Something's not right, whatever it is. And really, I still don't even know how to describe what was happening to me. I don't know if it was an emotional break, a mental break, a spiritual break. I think it was a little bit of all 3 combined. But that day, I learned what burnout was. I learned that it's not always an event, but it's a buildup. It's a ramp up. Because if I look back on that day, that moment was coming for a long time, but I didn't do anything to stop it. And so that's why today when I lead, even as I step in to lead again and be a senior pastor again since that time, my approach is so different. Is that now I'm not focused on trying to do it all. I don't feel the responsibility of trying to do it all and trying to be there for every person. You know, there's a bunch of people, people in our church, and everybody has needs, but I don't put the responsibility on myself to be there for all people. What I've learned is, as a leader, my goal is to make sure, to the best of my ability, that everybody has the opportunity to be cared for, not that they have the opportunity to be cared for by me. No, it doesn't have to be me, but they need to receive the care. And so what I'm learning is my leadership responsibility. And again, I come out of an old school kind of mentality where it's like, no, if you're the pastor, you got to do it. And what I'm learning is I can do it, but number one, I limit how much of that we're available to do as a church, but I also limit the people around me who could do it so much better than me. And so one of the reasons you need a team is to avoid burnout. Because as gifted as you are, you have a breaking point. And here's a scary thing. We often don't know what that point is until we cross it. We often don't know what the line is until we cross it. And so what I'm saying to you is, you need to be focused on building a team, because it's going to help you be able to do ministry better, longer, by making sure that you don't burn out. All right. Second reason you need a team is to expand the kingdom. There are people all around you who are gifted beyond measure, but they need someone to lead them, to help them see the fullness of what God has put in them. There are so many people that we often lead. And I remember this, another lesson that the Lord has taught me along the way is I remember praying and begging the Lord to send me leaders and to send people who could help me lead and send people who could get it done. When I go back and dissect that prayer, really what I was asking God to do was take some people from another church and send them to our church. Because I wasn't asking him to send me any unbelievers. I wasn't asking him to send me people, who was just sitting at home chilling. I was asking him to send me seasoned leaders, who could help me lead the church. And when I dissect that prayer, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because it's like, man, I'm really saying, Lord, take the best people from another church and send them to me. And in that moment, the Lord said something to me I didn't understand then, but I understand much better now. what I felt the Holy Spirit really whisper to me was, if you build them, you will always have them. And I'm telling you, this is in a season of my life where I'm discovering systems. See, I'm the simple systems guy today because of all the mistakes I made 10 years ago, right? And I remember him saying, if you build them, you'll always have them. And so one of the reasons that you need a team is that you expand the kingdom by releasing people into what God has called them to do. You know, if you want to have if you want to have leaders in your church, once you start leading at a place, I say beyond 5 years, whatever the leaders are who are in that church beyond 5 years, it's a product of whatever system, culture, and processes that you have implemented as a leader. Now, if you haven't done that yet, you've been in a church longer than 5 years, don't feel this is condemnation, because really it's about awareness. You know, sometimes a lot of the things that need to be done that we don't do because we don't know. And these are things that I didn't know either. These are things that I had to learn the hard way. But I'm thankful that God sent a leader to me. A leader came to me and said this same thing. He heard me complaining about our young church in about year 2 and about the people. And he says, well, look, give it some time. He says, because in 5 years, they're going to look like you. Whoever you genuinely are, the people are going to look like that. And that's one of the things that we learn, you know, and depending on your situation, if you're a church planter, that's much easier to do because you get to set culture from day one. If you're stepping into an existing role, then you've got to move a little bit more gently. And as Bishop Dale Bronner said to me recently, is that you can't be a revolutionary, you've got to be an evolutionary. That changes can't be a revolution, they've got to be an evolution. Is that you've got to bridge the gap between where people are and where they're headed. But you expand the kingdom as you bring more people into it. You know, there are some very real stories that I could tell right now about some leaders in our church who have really risen to the occasion and stepped up to the plate. But it's all because, you know, I gave them a chance. I saw what the Lord was doing in them, and I said, hey, look, I'm going to release you to it. I said, just come back to me with vision. And here's the thing. Sometimes as leaders, we're so scared to release authority and release power because we're afraid of what are people going to do? And here's what it is. You got to find the right system. If you develop the right system to do it, I promise you it's doable. All right. I'll give you this brief tidbit and then we'll go on. So here's what I did. So I gave every one of our leaders a document and I said, hey, look, here's what I'm looking for. Here's the ultimate purpose of what I'm asking you to do. Here's why it matters. Here's the outcomes I want to see. Here's the specific objectives. Like I just gave them this whole detailed list. And then I said to them, now come back to me with your thoughts and with your plan on paper as well. See, that's where so many of us miss it. The first time you see what a leader's vision is should not be in action. It should be on paper first. But you've got to set that culture. Is that you've got to give them vision on paper. Challenge them to give you vision on paper. Because we write things out, it forces us to think through it more in detail. And so now, when you see what they have on paper, now you can sit there and wrestle with it and say, okay, cool, this part is great. Let's adjust this part. Let's change this part, whatever it is. But you can walk through it. And so there's not this great amount of fear that comes from saying, oh, well, I just got to go let them run with it. No, you don't. You've got to create a space to hear what's in their heart and the wisdom that God has given them first. And then once you get that, now let's go to the next space. All right. And when you do that, I'm telling you, man, you can expand the kingdom. Like I gave some vision to leaders. And for the ones who are really called to it, they grabbed it and they took it way further than I could have ever imagined. They took it further. They stretched it out there. They went far beyond. And now the kingdom is being expanded. Third reason you need a team is personal relationships. Personal relationships. I've been practicing this new thing and I have a coach and a mentor too. And for me, one of those people right now is Dr. Conway Edwards of One Community Church out in the Dallas area and so many others. And one of the things that he's been working with us on is defining the circles of our life, right? And with the blueprint that we're working through, there are 4 concentric circles in your life. In that circle, we call them zones, zone 1, 2, 3, and 4, starting inside, working outside. And in those concentric circles, zone 1 is really your immediate family. It's the people who have complete and total access to your life, that no matter what you're doing, you will stop anything and everything in order to meet the need of people in that zone, right? That's your zone 1. And what I want to talk to you about today are zones 2 and 3. Because in zone 2, these are the maybe 5 people who are most instrumental to helping you achieve the purpose that God has put on your life, right? So these 5 people are the people who walk really, really closest to you. And they may not have 100% total access, but they might have 75, 80% access. That you do life with these people. That these are people that you need to talk to at least once a week, because of the depth of relationship and purpose connection that you have. And here's what I'm learning is, in the past, I've not been great at defining that level of people. It's just, if I'm being honest, you go through enough things in ministry, and you serve people who don't serve you back. You love people who don't love you back. And then you take it to another level. You love people who, some way or another, find a way to demonize you after you love them, right? You help them through a season of their life, and then one day they decide to do something different and go somewhere else. But most people don't know how to leave things well. And so instead of just saying, I made a choice to go to a different place, they've got to figure out ways to make where they were wrong so that they can make where they're going right. And you go through that enough, and you start to build these walls, even as a leader. And I'm really good with being really, really hands off and not emotionally attached with people. And what I've learned, and what I'm still learning, is that I need people that I can emotionally attach to. Now, does that make me vulnerable? And does that put you in a spot where sometimes you're going to be hurt? Absolutely. But I think that's a part of suffering with Christ. I just think about what it was like for Jesus to watch Judas handle the money of the disciples, build relationships with the other 11. Every conversation that Judas had, and Jesus heard Judas say something, knowing Judas was actually going to be the one who would betray not just him, but betray them all. And yet he just kept going. And I know he's Jesus, and I'm not Jesus, so I don't have that level of grace just yet, where I can know a betrayer is next to me and keep going. But here's what I'm saying, is that you do need a place where you have some personal relationships. And that whole myth of you can't be friends with the people that you lead, it's just antithetical to Scripture. Even you look at Jesus and the 12, he says, I don't call you servant, I call you friend. Like, Jesus was with these people all the time, every day in his life. And now, is there a way that you can do that wrong? Yes. Are there people who can't handle that? Absolutely. But what am I saying to you? What I'm saying to you is that you've got to figure out who the people are who can handle it. And if you can't figure it out, you got to pray through it and ask the Lord to reveal to you who those people are, because you need a team so you won't burn out, right? I did not mean to spend this much time on that portion, but I know how important it is that you need a team, because you need personal relationships. And yes, you need other pastors, but you need people who are in the mud with you in the fray, but who are committed to their relationship with Jesus first, but then also their relationship with you, who can honor you, be honest with you, and bring all those things to the table. All right. So now we can get into the practical nature of building your future team. But all of that was just about why you need it, right? So that was my introduction, right? Now we can really start to get into, really what you need, right? Now, as we start to get into this, I want to talk about what might be blocking your team from becoming everything that it needs to be, right? Because you may have a team already, and some of that team you have, it's what you got. Because if we're honest, some of us have been in situations where you don't have the pick of the litter, right? You got to work with what you have. And so one of the things that I always do when something is not right, or when something is not growing, or when something is not moving in the direction that I believe it needs to go, one of the questions that I've learned to ask is, even before I ask, what do we need to fix? I ask, what do we need to stop doing that might be holding us back? So what might be out there that's blocking us, right? That's even a philosophy for church growth, is that it's not what we need to do. Because even if you look at growth in the human body, We don't force ourselves to grow, but there are things that we can do to stunt our growth by not giving ourselves the correct vitamins or having a correct diet or so forth and so on. Like, we can keep ourselves from growing, but growth is a natural process. And so when it's not happening, you have to ask what's keeping it and what's holding it back. So I want to talk about 3 things that might be blocking their team from moving forward. Number 1 is pride. Pride might be blocking your team. Your need to always be in control might be holding the team back. You know, again, as I just shared, this is something I'm currently walking through with the leaders that I'm working with. And so what I'm saying to them is, here's a general vision, and here's the vision for where we need to go. Yes, I am going to give the vision as God's chosen leader. I have a responsibility to communicate to people and to our leaders where I believe God is calling us to go. And so I'm telling them the what and the why, but I'm not overly controlling the how. Right? I'm giving them some thoughts and I'm giving them some ideas and I'm telling them what I believe could work. And then I'm giving them some freedom to come back to me and say, okay, here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's where we're going. Here's where we're headed. Right? I'm giving them that freedom. And so, because one of the things that might be holding your team back is that you're trying to get people to do something without giving them the freedom to fully understand what and why you're doing it. You've got to do it. You know, explaining things to people does not mean they control you. It does not mean that you become a puppet and all this other stuff that we sometimes hold on to. But pride will make us think that because the end game is for us to get the credit for whatever growth happens here, pride makes us say people should just do what we tell them to do. And it's like, if you take that approach, it's your vision that you're trying to execute. And if it's your vision, you're going to be limited in the number of people who are willing to be a part of it. But if this is God's vision and you allow people to bring what God is sharing with them into it, you create a whole nother thing. So pride might be blocking you and blocking your team. The second thing is laziness. You know, here's the reality. You know, I encounter a lot of leaders who are just not willing to put in the work to do what they're called to do. I told you this in the last episode. Pastoring is a hard job. Pastoring is not this thing that you just wake up and it's all hugs and kisses all the time. It takes effort. And your work ethic is going to determine whether or not you put your effort into the right things. Right? And what I'm telling you, even on the pride side, the reason that so many leaders are tired and exhausted is because, number 1, they're putting their effort and their energy into the wrong things. You're chasing rabbits. And if you would stop chasing rabbits and empower your team to do what they need to do, everything would change. But one of the things that keeps you from empowering your team can be laziness, right? I'm just being honest. I'm just being honest with you. Because here's one of the greatest things that you can do with your team is to spend time preparing to preach, spend a lot of time in prayer, but to empower them to lead. And what you have to do to fully empower people is that you have to be willing to do the brain work. So many leaders miss this. One of the most important things that you could be doing every week is the brain work of thinking through the intricacies of the ministry and how you can empower people to see what they should be thinking about this week. That's what leadership does. Is that if you would set aside a day and here's an exercise. I'm gonna give this on the spot impromptu. I didn't even prepare for this. Here's an exercise. I want you to write down a list of all the leaders in the church, right? Where they lead a ministry, they lead a small group, they lead a Sunday school class. Just write down a list of the leaders, right? And now that you got a list of the leaders and what they lead, now every week I just want you to sit down and just write out one sentence about what that leader should be focused on this week. All right. So you say, okay, the worship leader this week, you should be focused on smooth transitions. How we transition from one song to the next without that awkward pause in between. You might say to the small group leader, pastoral care for group leaders or check-ins for group leaders. Just calling those group leaders and checking in on them, making sure they're doing all right, finding out if they faced any issues this week, whatever it may be, right? And just do that for every person on your team. Do that brain work and then give it to them and watch how they respond. Good people want to be led. They want to be led, but they need a leader who's consistent and willing to bring to the table what they're asking for. And here's the third thing that might be blocking your team is you might be the wrong fit for the ministry where you lead? This is a hard one. This is a hard one because I've had to come face to face with this before in the past. Is that you might be serving or in a role that no longer fits you in this season of your life. You know, sometimes depending on what culture you come from, the only way, the pinnacle of who we can become is to be the senior pastor or the senior leader of a church, is to be a ministry leader, whatever it is. And the reality is that many of us have never explored how effective we could be if we explored another role. Man, one of the best things I ever did was to spend 2 years as an executive pastor because I was convinced I didn't want to be a senior pastor anymore. I was convinced, man, I could better serve a vision if I could just focus on the things I love to do, like discipleship and developing leaders and all those kind of things. Like if I could do those things, that'd be the best thing I could ever do. And so I had some years where I did it and I got a chance to experience it. And to a degree, like it was so fulfilling to, instead of being the leader of a small church, to be on the staff at a larger church where we can affect more change in mass. And we were able to do a lot of great things in that season of my life in ministry. And I appreciated the experience. But the other thing that experience taught me was what my real value was as a senior leader. Because, you know, I always thought, just like the traditional setting, it's your preaching. It's how you preach that makes all the difference. It's your preaching and it's the ideas that you come up with and all that kind of stuff. And I learned, you know what? No, it's not that. Like as a leader, one of the biggest things I bring to the table is, yes, my preaching, but it's in my empowering of other people. See, I learned that was a great fit. And so now, before I even came to the church where I currently am, I was looking around and going like, do I see space where I could empower people to really make a difference in the world? And I saw people who were already being empowered. I saw a culture where people had already been empowered. And so all I had to do was come in and keep that going and just take it to the next level as the Lord led. And so one of the things that you have to think about is that you might be a better teaching pastor than lead pastor. Like you might be great if all you had to do was preach. But if you're talking about leading deeply and things of that nature, it might be another ball game. So you might be the wrong fit. All right. So now let's jump into to really what we want to talk about. I want to talk about 3 things that you can do to build your team for the future. And when I give you these 3 things, I'm going to give you some directives underneath them that are really going to help you a lot. But I want to give you these 3 things that you can do to take it to the next level. All right. Number 1 is clarify your vision. You need to get crystal clear about what your vision is and where you're trying to lead the church. Because if you don't detail and lay out for people where we're really headed as a church, as an organization, then they're always going to be cloudy about what their job is. Because every person who does anything within the church or the organization needs to be able to see how it fits into the life of the big picture. Because if not, they'll be messing around creating something that doesn't fit into the future that you're trying to build or that the Lord has called you to build. So you need to clarify your vision. So when it comes to clarifying your vision, there's a couple of things I want you to think about. Number 1, I want you to think about your mission. I want you to answer this question. What are we really doing here? Like, what are we really doing? Like, what's the bottom line? And the way that I like to say this is your mission statement is how you contextualize the Great Commission. How do you put the Great Commission into words for your unique church, right? So for us at our church, our mission is we exist to make, develop, and empower transformed followers of Jesus Christ, right? So we're laying out our process. We want to introduce people to Jesus, that's make. We want to grow people up in Jesus, that's develop. And then we want to release people in ministry for Jesus, that's empower, right? So that's how we execute and how we contextualize the Great Commission. You want to figure that out for your church. What does it look like to contextualize the Great Commission in your setting? You need to be really clear about what you're trying to do. So for us, it's make, develop, empower, right? Those are the 3 things. And so when I've got a leader over discipleship, they know that as a part of our make, develop, empower, They're the bridge between make and develop. They're the bridge, right? They're the bridge where we introduced them to Jesus, but they're the ones who set the foundation of developing and even pushing people to empower, right? Same thing with our children's ministry. Our children's ministry wants to make, develop, and empower, transform, follow Jesus Christ. So every ministry finds their mission within the grand mission of what we're called to do. So you need to clarify your mission. Number two, you need to clarify your values. Values, and I really borrow a lot of this from Will Mancini and his blueprint. If you haven't read the book God Dreams or Church Unique, oh my goodness, two amazing resources to help you with this. But when you talk about values, you're talking about why are we doing this? Like, why does this matter? Like, why is this important? Right? Why are we doing this? How do we contextualize the values that we carry? Like for us, we've got that grand mission, but some of our values are seek first. Want to make sure that we're going to the Lord first for whatever it is that we're called to do. We want to serve others. Like that's a why behind our what, right? That's what you're answering, the why behind your what. So you want to get your values. The third thing, and this is really important, is you want to define your pathway. Like what's the journey that you want to see people go on, right? What's the path that people are going to go on? So for us, that pathway looks just like our mission statement, make, develop, empower. So you start with make. That typically happens through our worship gathering, because that's where most people come in the front door. That's how they get introduced to Jesus, or that's how they make a decision. Then they go to develop, which is where they go through our new members course, and they go through some spiritual gifts testing and some foundational teaching. They learn about the church, they learn about the ministry, all those kind of things. That's where they get developed. Some of that also happens in small groups where people are growing in faith, things of that nature. And then they move on around to empower. And in empower, that's where they become a small group leader. That's where they're serving consistently, or maybe even leading a ministry or a team, all those different things. And then the path starts back over, except now they're taking somebody else through it, right? So that's the pathway. So think about this. If a person shows up to church for the first time this weekend, what's the journey you want them to go on? You need to define that, because it's the definition of that journey that's going to help them see exactly what you expect of them. And it's also going to define the pathway that you're going to use to actually grow people up. All right. And then here's the final thing that you need when it comes to clarifying your vision is signs. So it's an acronym. I call this the MVPs of a church, right? So you need the signs. And so the signs are basically, if you go on a road trip, there's a reason that all along the highway, all along the interstate, you see signs. Those signs let you know that you're headed in the right direction. And so for your church, what are the signs that you need or want to see along the way that let you know that you're doing exactly what the Lord called you to do? All right. So for example, we talk about working together as one of our values. And that means that as a leader or as a person in the church, I can't only care about my ministry, right? I've got to care about every ministry in the church, because we're a family, we're a team. So a sign would be me working with another leader to help them execute a plan or a strategy in the ministry that they lead, right? It's me helping people outside of my ministry push the mission forward. That's a sign. So when we see people doing that, for example, in our church, when I see our children's ministry leader helping to set up the hospitality station in the morning because the hospitality leader is pregnant, that's a sign of somebody living out one of our values, right? That's a sign of what we want to see. So the first thing you want to do, if you want to build your team for the future, you've got to clarify your vision. You got to clarify your vision, because when you put the right language to your vision, that is what's going to signal to those people who fit that vision, those team members who fit that vision, that this is the right place for me. So you got to clarify your vision, all right? That's the first thing you can do. Number two is you've got to define the who's. You've got to define your who's. So many of us and so many leaders, we want these people to walk alongside us. We want these people who can help us. We want these people who will be with us. But we never take the time to actually define them. And so I want to challenge you to stop and define them. I want to challenge you to stop and define who they are, define what they do, define all those different things. You got to define your who's. Who are the people that you're praying for God to send? What do they look like? What do they sound like? What do they do, right? Couple of things for you to think about in defining your who. Number one, what are the roles that you're looking for? Like, okay, I just want people. Well, what kind of people? Okay, you want somebody to do what? So you say, you know what? I need somebody who is a strong administrator. All right, cool. Let's work on that. What does that role look like? Right? And this is the hard work that as a leader, if you do it on the front end, you'll get the results on the back end. But what does that role look like? Okay, they're a strong administrator. What does a strong administrator do? Well, they keep track of this. They keep track of that. They send me a report on this every Sunday. They send me this. They send me that. What does that look like as we drive the train forward, right? So what are the roles or the specific roles that you're talking about when you talk about having this person who can get this done? Number two, what are the traits? What are the qualities of the person or the people that you're looking for? Maybe they're faithful, they're committed, they're dedicated, they're consistent givers. What are those traits? What do those people do that causes you to really put a priority on looking for them and going after them and chasing after them? Who are those people? What are their traits? Define it out. Because when you define it, you can more clearly recognize it when you see it. You know, that's a principle. I think Einstein first talked about it. But how our brains are wired to ignore things and to ignore tons of gigabytes and terabytes of data every day. Because if our brain called everything to our attention, we constantly be in a state of distraction. And so focus is the ability to only recognize those things that are important to us at that place or time. And so a part of you being able to recognize your who's is that you've got to tell yourself exactly what you're looking for, right? It's like deciding that you want a certain car, and then now every time you go somewhere, that's the only car you see. It looks like everybody has it. Well, that car has always been around you. But when you start looking for it and you want it, now your brain says, oh, I need to draw attention to this when we see it. Like your brain is an immaculate machine. And so when you know that you're looking for something, your brain tells you to recognize it. So define those traits. Number three, gift mix. What are the spiritual gifts that you need around you, right? And you can think about this a couple of different ways. You can think about this from a traditional spiritual gifts test, right? If you're talking about building stage designs every week, then you need somebody with the gift of craftsmanship, right? If you're talking about, building a prayer team, you need somebody with the gift of intercession, whatever it may be. Or you can use the Fivefold platform, apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, not as title, but as lenses through which we see ministry. And so you can use those, but define the gift mix that you're looking at. This is why when we set up discipleship classes for people in our program, one of the things that we encourage them to do is that we do gifts testing throughout the classes that they take. So when they take that class on gifts testing, we encourage you to log that into your church management software. So now whenever you have a new role or you're looking for a new leader, you can go in that software and tell it, show me everybody with the gift of administration. And now here comes a list of all these people with the gift of administration. And you can go in there and just send those people a text or an email and say, hey, we've got this new position open. I'd love for you to apply. Click here if you want to apply to be a part of helping us in this area, right? And you just put it out there, boom, it's done. But it only happens if you know what you're looking for. So gift mix is another thing that you need to define. Another one is the lens. And I alluded to this a little bit because I call the Fivefold Ministry a lens through which we see ministry, right? The apostle, the prophet, the evangelist, shepherd, teacher that Paul talks about in Ephesians 4. And I don't see those as necessarily titles. I believe they can be titles, but I don't see them that way. And so one of the things that I'm encouraging you to think about is what lens do you need around you? Because here's what the scripture tells us, that Jesus was trying to fill the entire earth with himself. And the perfect picture of Jesus is when all five of those lenses operate together. So what you need to know, number one, is what's your primary lens. So for example, my primary lens is apostolic, which means that I'm always thinking about how to move the church forward. Is that I'm always thinking about the government of the church. I'm always thinking about how do we put down train tracks. And so for me, since I'm apostolic in nature, is that I'm building train tracks in a place that a lot of times the rest of our team isn't even thinking about going yet, right? So right now, at the time of this recording, it's early 2022. And my brain is already in 2023. Like I'm already thinking about what's the next progression for next year from where we are today, right? So I'm building train tracks down the road, and they're helping me do it. They just don't know it yet, right? Because that's my lens. But because I'm so apostolic, I've got to keep somebody around me who is prophetic. Because where I'm thinking about government, that prophetic gift is thinking about guidance. So they're always thinking of are we in alignment with God? I'm thinking a lot of times how to move the church forward, and they're just making sure, let's make sure, we're in alignment with God. And that's my second gift. So I have a great deal of that, but I'm always keeping those around. Same thing with shepherding people. I need people who are willing to slow down into every detail of people's lives. And so what I'm encouraging you to think about is define who you are, but also start to recognize and look for people who bring to the table an area that may not be your strength. If you're a great pastor or shepherd, you may not be a great leader. Find somebody who is. You may not be very administrative. Find somebody who is. So as much as people will call on you to help them with their personal things in life, they get frustrated by your leadership style and how you walk things along, and maybe vice versa. As strong as you can be as a leader in organizing projects and things of that nature, people may be frustrated with how, or your lack of ability to handle personal relationships or handle finances or whatever it is. Lean into where you're weak and find somebody who feels it. Final thing, and this is an important one, is you need to define your pace. Oh my goodness. You need to define your pace. You need to know the rhythm of how aggressively you move in ministry. Because if you have a really slow pace, going after somebody who has a fast pace, you're going to frustrate them if you don't give them enough freedom. And vice versa. If you as a leader have a fast pace where you're driven and you can move from one project to the next, you've got to consider that before you pull people onto your team. Because either you're going to have to adjust to the people that God has called you to lead, or you're going to frustrate them by trying to make them move faster than they're able to move. Right? And you've got to understand that. And so you need to know your pace so that you make sure that as you're bringing people onto the team, that you can be very clear about what your expectations are and how fast you move. Right? So for example, for me, when I have an idea about something, if I do it myself, that idea is thought through and executed by the end of the week. And yet I have leaders on my team who I need to introduce something to them, and give them a week or two to think through it, and then give them another 2 or 3 weeks to actually execute it. So what I would think could be done in 3 days might take 6 weeks, right? But here's the thing. I counted that cost already. And because I counted that cost, what I do is that I introduce things to them well before I actually need it done. And again, that's personal organization. And so because I'm so ahead in my mind, I'm giving them things knowing it's going to take them 6 weeks. And so by the time they hit 6 weeks, the moment when I actually wanted to execute it or needed to execute it is already there. And so we meet up in that space. See, where we get in trouble is when we have fast pace and our pace of execution is really fast, but our pace of communication is really slow. That's where we get in trouble. And so we give stuff to people and need it immediately without giving them time to process it. All right. So you need to define your pace. All right. So now that's 2. So we talked about getting clarity, getting some vision clarity, defining your who's. Here's the third thing you need to do is you need to build your strategy. All right. Here's another way that you're going to build your team of the future is that you need to get a framework for the strategy. Look at that picture right there, that construction site. You don't see any curtains. You don't see any design. You don't see any furniture. You don't see any of that stuff. Why? Because that stuff comes later. What starts this whole process is the strategy and the structure of what's behind it. So that's what I'm telling you to build. So here's a couple of things for you to do within there. If you really want to build a team, here's a couple of things you need to do. You need to frame out the schedule for how often you're going to connect with that team. All right. So currently right now, I meet with all of our ministry leaders once a week on Sunday nights for a 1-hour Zoom call. And it's a hard 1 hour. At 1 hour, we shut it down. I meet with our staff every Monday morning And that call, that meeting is in person and it varies. Like we just did it recently and it went almost 3 hours, right? And that was because we were doing some content that was really strong. Everybody was really engaged with it, and so they drove the meeting. The meeting wasn't long because of me; it was long because of them. And so it was one that we all embraced, and we didn't even realize how much time had passed, right? But you've got to frame out the schedule, right? If you're trying to build a team of leaders, you need to give them a schedule for when you want to meet with them, so that they can make a good decision about whether or not they can commit to that. Number two, you need to frame out your content. One of the things that I promised to our leaders when they came on staff, I said, every week I'm going to give you high level content. And so every week I'm basically summarizing a book for them. I'm finding free book summary PDFs on the internet because so many of them are out there. I'm finding graphs and resources. I'm giving them stuff that I created, whatever it is. I'm giving them high level content and I'm challenging the way they think. And I'm saying to them, hey, look, here's what it is. Because in our church context, we're building a diverse church. And so we're pulling together people who come from all different backgrounds. I come out of the Baptist church, but our church was born out of the Mennonite denomination. And we're not Mennonite any longer, but that's where a lot of people come from. We've got some people coming out of a Pentecostal background. We've got people coming out of Church of Christ. We've got all these different things. And so now, instead of us brooding in our differences, what we're doing is that we're training for the future together. And so I'm being really focused on the content that I share with them and that I lead them in, because what we need to study are things that's going to push us forward together. So you need to define what resources are out there that you want to pour into people. So imagine people as a cup and your resources as some kind of drink. What do you want to pour into people? So whatever you want to pour into them, you need to go find a bottle of that and start pouring it into your people. And then finally, you need to define your expectations. Expectations. Like, what do you expect of these people that you're developing, this future team that you're trying to build? What are your expectations for them? What are your hopes for them? What are your dreams? What are your desires? What do you want to see happen in their lives as a result of walking on this journey with you? You want to see them become ministry leaders? You want to see them become campus pastors? You want to see them become small group leaders? What are your expectations? What do you want to see them do? You want to define that. Whatever that means for you, you define it, you lay it out so that you can help them be really clear about where we're going next. So listen, as always, if you need help with this, I love the opportunity to explore being the help you need. All you've got to do is click this button in the show notes or below this blog, below this video, and schedule your free discovery call. I'll sit with you and talk to you about what's happening in your church, in your nonprofit, in your organization, whatever it may be. And I'll see if I can help you if we're a great fit to help you get to the other side. As always, I hope and pray that this